Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 15th, 2021 regular meeting of the Sachem Board of Education. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence for all of our troops away from their homes during the holidays, protecting our freedoms. I'm going to hand the meeting over to Dr. Pelletieri for the superintendent's update.
Thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, safety and security is really, and everyone's at the forefront of all that we do of late, given the tragic events in Michigan 2 weeks ago or so. Security is always a concern of mine, always a concern of this board's. And we had a couple of security issues that I need to speak frankly about, and I could give some detail I'm not going to give in public, but two things that I want to talk about. One was something that we handled on, or lack thereof on my part, on the 6th of December, Monday, where early that morning I received a phone call from Suffolk County Department of Police saying that they had received a call, actually more than one call, about what they thought could be possibly, they weren't sure, there was more or less a rumor of a possible threat at East High School. Didn't know what they were dealing with. Time was of the essence, and they wanted to put it on our radar. I took the approach that we should let people know what was going on. I spoke with our board president, shot something out to our board very quickly, and then spoke to Mr. Antonetti, called him very early in the morning on Monday, and said, let's get something out to the community about an unsubstantiated, unverified report that there could possibly be a threat at East. We did not want to hold on to that information given the state of the world these days. That information went out to the East community about 6:14 a.m., 6:24, somewhere around there a.m. But it went out only as an email, and that's something that I apologize for. I should have been more clear in my conversation with Mr. Antonetti. It was my fault that it went out only as an email. And when there's pressing incidents such as that, something has to do with safety and security of students and staff, obviously I should have followed up with a robocall as well, and that did not happen. So what happened is, as students arrived, as we went throughout the early part of the day, kids started to talk about this concern and evolved from this unsubstantiated, we don't know what we have, not sure what's going on kind of threat, possibly to, oh no, there's a threat. Like when I went up there that day and spoke with students and staff, that was the conversation. There's a threat at East. We don't want to be here. We're not comfortable. Parents started to come pick up students, and it started to snowball from there. It did not help that many people in this community, in many communities, get a lot of their information actually from social media as opposed to from the schools themselves. That's, again, a concern of mine, a concern of this board's, and I need to do better in terms of communicating. Had I put out a robocall instead of just the email, more people will have received it. It might have allayed some fears, and it might have helped the situation. So I recognize it is incumbent upon us to communicate better. This same type of threat concern happened in a couple other districts near us, same type of flight from school, a lot of people not going to school, but they did a robocall and an email. They got it out early, and people just didn't show up. They didn't have the nonstop kind of pickup that we had. That led to a lot of concerns. Someone went on Facebook and said, school's closing, come pick up your children, staff is leaving. That person was not a Sachem employee and was not a Sachem parent, but people, again, took that as fact and started to come up also. So again, something that we need to work on, I need to work on. I want to improve our communication to our families, make sure that they get their information from us, that we are the greatest source, and we need to do that better. There have been threats throughout the nation of late. You may have heard of different things going on throughout the country, throughout the state. There's a threat that's going around on TikTok. I don't know, the kids are not here tonight. I don't know anything that's positive that has come out of this TikTok thing. Maybe some people like it, I don't know. But there are threats now on TikTok for Friday, the 17th of December. I don't know if anyone heard this, saw this. It is of great concern, obviously. Anytime there's a threat to our most precious commodity, which is our kids, we are concerned and we respond. We immediately send the threat to Suffolk County Police Department. They immediately respond back. We've been looking at this for days. It seemed to come out of Virginia. It's all over the nation. They're just saying schools will be attacked. High schools, middle schools, elementary schools. It will happen on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday, or it will happen on the 17th. It seems that nefarious folks are going in and just trying to destroy what it is that schools are attempting to do, which is to keep our kids safe and calm and comfortable in learning environments. They're really frightening the heck out of people. So if you hear anything about the 17th, I know we've gotten countless phone calls today, emails across our district. You'll know that earlier this week, I did send a community update that there are more and more of these quasi threats that seem to be targeted at just disrupting what's going on in schools and taking advantage of the fact that we are very concerned about our kids and our staff. So as I said then, and I'll say now, anything that pertains to us specifically, you will hear from us. We will communicate that to you if there is a specific concern anywhere. When I went up to East on Monday around what happened there, the police were there. There were several cars. There were police officers. When I arrived, I thanked them. When I left, I thanked the police officers again. But some spoke to me afterwards, some parents, and said that actually concerned their kids even more, that the police are here, the police are here. Obviously, the police are great partners. We want them working with us. I'm saddened to hear that some kids are afraid when they see the police. They're here to protect us, obviously, but it does frighten us in some regards because of the concerns around why are they here. So I'll move forward from that piece. Another incident that concerned us greatly was an incident on a North bus, and that took place on December 8th in the early pre-dawn hours. Two individuals, two adults, entered a North bus, a high school bus, sat down on that bus, and rode that bus for several stops. Eventually, about a mile or so, a couple miles up the road, stood up from their seats, demanded that we have to get off the bus. We need to get off the bus, and they were let off the bus. It's at that time when the bus driver recognized that these individuals did not belong on the bus, that these were adults and not students that should have been on the bus. We immediately called the police when we were aware of it. We reviewed all the audio and video. The police felt it wasn't criminal in nature at that time. One of the things that we've done is sticker all of our buses now. They all have them, the buses we own, plus Town and the contracted buses we work with. They're stickered as well, so you immediately would know that if you are entering that bus unauthorized, you would be trespassing. Criminal trespass you'd be subject to. That's one of the things we did. We're doing a great many trainings as well. If you're going to be a bus driver in this district, well, of course, anywhere, you have to do 30 hours of training before you are permitted to drive. There are twice a year refreshers around training, retraining. One of the things we're doing is we're working with the TSA directly here in our district. All our drivers, along with the Town and drivers, will be trained in January around people entering and exiting the buses and making sure that there is safety throughout the bus ride. We're doing a couple other things as well with safety and security around the district. We had a safety and security meeting. Today we'll report out on that later, Patty, and talk about that as well. There are hundreds of routes every day. There are thousands of routes every week. There are tens of thousands of routes every month. This is not something that can ever happen. It can happen. The driver, many people spoke to me. They felt it was unfortunate. Pre-dawn hours, it's pitch black. Hoods are on, masks may be on. People have their head down looking at a phone. It's hard to determine. It just cannot happen. No matter what happens, it can't happen. So it can't happen again. So we are taking those steps to make sure that we are safe. Again, I will reiterate, safety and security of our students, their health, their welfare is the single most important thing we can provide to our community. We take it very seriously. I'll add one last piece. I spoke to the secondary principals. I asked that they make sure that their youngsters in those schools carry and have their ID cards, their picture ID cards on with them at all times. I think that's an important step for us to make sure those students have those at the ready in case we need to identify anybody at any time. So, two very important safety issues. They are continuously ongoing and reviewed, and I think we may hear some recommendations tonight from school safety as well as we move forward. That's really what I wanted to talk about tonight. I think it's at the forefront of what's on everyone's mind, and that's why I wanted to address it immediately. So thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Chris, we will have an opportunity
Just put
later
your mic.
to update, the outcome of that meeting, the school safety meeting.
Yes, during the board updates on committee meetings, yes.
Okay.
I do have to, Mr. Piccarello, if you don't
Yeah,
mind,
please.
I did receive just today a citation for all of our board members from Assemblyman Doug Smith. I'm going to read very quickly here. Over the past 20 months, our state and nation have faced an unprecedented crisis in our lifetime. With this new and unexpected pandemic, you and your colleagues, as elected boards of education trustees, have met with many unexpected responsibilities. Working to help coordinate child care for first responders early in the pandemic, coming up with creative solutions to deliver meals to children in need, dealing with uncertain school transportation contract issues, pioneering new widespread remote learning for students across the community. We've confronted these challenges head-on with great resolve. We've continued to work to provide the children of our district with the greatest educational opportunities possible while working to keep them safe within a budget that our residents can afford. All the while, you've been saddled with countless directives under a state of emergency from March 2020 to July 2021, and the more recent emergency regulations from New York State Department of Health. Despite many of these decisions being made with little or no input from you and your colleagues, that has not stopped passions from running high at board meetings. I know at times like this, it can be discouraging. As a ranking member of the New York State Assembly Education Committee, I want to take a moment to recognize your dedication to the children and families of our district. Please find enclosed citation from New York State Assembly, as well as a copy of a quote I have hanging off on the wall of my office at a speech given by Teddy Roosevelt, from which I'm sure you can relate. Thank you for your continued service. Respectfully, Assemblyman Douglas M. Smith. This is, we have a citation for everyone on the board.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doug. Before we move on, I just wanted to take a minute. The board got together and we wanted to do something special. We recently found out that our longtime district lawyer was going to be leaving us. No day was off limit, no time was off limit. And we got together and we had this plaque made. It says, presented to Christopher J. Clayton for years of dedication, counsel, and advocacy to the Sachem Central School District. So we just wanted to have this plaque for you. And I just wanted to have Rob wanted to say a few words too.
Smiling under my mask.
Mr. Clay, that is a plaque that we give our students, right? Our family members. You are certainly a member of this family and will always be. Thank you so much.
If I may just take a minute, I don't want to take too much time, but it has
Chris,
been.
feel free to speak as you often do, to go on and on if you like.
It has been one of the profound honors of my life to serve as your counsel for 21 years. You have truly made me feel an honorary member of the Sachem community. You know, Matthew and I come from the same hometown, and I certainly have a strong sense of place from where I grew up. But having the opportunity to have a second family at Sachem all these years has been something that makes me incredibly proud, and I'm humbled. Your friendship, as well as your professional, collegial work with me, I feel like in some small way, I've helped to contribute to the betterment of a place that I know you all love so much. We've been through some very difficult times over the years and some certainly wonderful times. And I'm just proud, so proud to be associated with all of you. You're my friends as well as my professional colleagues. And I thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it for all these years.
Chris, for being my personal consigliere, I wanted to make sure I said that and get that out there. If I call Chris Thanksgiving morning, he answers his phone. I call Chris Sunday night, he's driving somewhere to get his kids somewhere, he answers his phone. It's been an unbelievable partnership. I can't thank you enough. And would you just introduce the who we are finally referring to now as new Chris?
I call him the less handsome Chris.
Oh, that's That's your opinion. That's
Th-
your
th-
opinion.
this is my partner and dear friend Chris Venator, who is senior to me at Ingerman Smith, was a partner by the time I joined Ingerman Smith 21 years ago. Chris and I worked together in the district attorney's office back in the 1990s. He preceded me there as well. He has been to me a mentor, an advisor, my counsel, my friend, and I know that while I will miss you, and I certainly like to think that I brought some, unique flavor to the enterprise of being your counsel, you are in absolutely safe and capable hands with my friend Chris and the rest of my firm, who obviously is, an organization this size isn't just served by one person. We run deep on the bench. My partners and associates have been, involved in the representation of the district in many ways, and certainly, you're in great hands with Chris going forward.
Welcome, Chris. On the top of page 2, we're going to move towards the agenda. Letter F is approval of minutes for the November 17th, 2021 regular meeting. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mrs. Slattery, seconded by Mr. Isonia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 2 is visitors. Each visitor will be given 3 minutes to speak. We do have a visitor, Mrs. Girallo, please. And if you could just push the button there when you get there. Take your time, please.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Girallo. I'm a mother of 2 boys who both attend Samoset Middle School. I have always been a proud Sachem mom until now. Last May, my son was quarantined due to an exposure at school. Luckily, live streaming was an option, so he was able to continue learning alongside his classmates. This past September, on the second day of school, my son was once again exposed at school and sent home to quarantine for another 10 days. I was shocked to discover that there was no plan in place for home learning. Although a plan was clearly outlined on the district website, no process was established. It was day 2 of school, and I was told, "We're working on a plan. We'll call you next week." Next week? What was my son supposed to do today? How was he supposed to learn now? He hadn't even met all of his teachers yet. Only because I reached out to Dr. Pelletieri immediately was a plan quickly put into place for my son. But what about the other children? The other children quarantined with my son were not offered anything except assignments posted to Google Classroom. Those who reached out to ask about services finally were offered the remote sessions. Why did I have to demand that my son be educated during quarantine? And why were the other children not offered the same options? I quickly learned that remote learning for the 2021 to 22 school year was quite different than quarantine learning of the previous school year. Despite cameras being installed in each classroom, the teachers were not allowed to use them. Why is that? I surely hope that we are not allowing our teachers' union to be a barrier to our children's education. My child was offered 1 hour of home remote learning a week. To be clear, that means my child was offered 1 hour of math for 6 missed days of school. He was offered 1 hour of science for 6 missed days of school, and so on. How is that acceptable? How does 1 hour of learning make up for 6 missed classes? Why was my son forced to sit home and teach himself through Google Classroom when the technology was in place for him to view what was going on in school every day, every period? My son went back to school for 7 days and was exposed again at school. 6 more missed days for a total of 12 missed days during the first 5 weeks of school for a kid who was accustomed to perfect attendance. I have never been so embarrassed and disappointed to be a Sachem mom. As friends and family in other districts had much more robust learning options, Sachem's alternative was a huge disappointment. It has taken my son weeks to get back on track, and he still has a way to go. Kudos to the Samoset teachers. Most of my son's teachers went out of their way to communicate with my son and with me during quarantine, and they did everything they could to provide him with the best education in their power. But without the necessary technology and resources, we failed my son. My son is still struggling to catch up as he missed the building blocks of this school year. Dr. Pelletieri and the Board of Education, are we okay with failing our children? Why did our taxpayers pay to have cameras installed in each classroom for them to simply not be used? Why was it okay to use them at the end of June last school year, but not at the beginning of the school year this September. This makes no sense. More importantly, why am I the only parent to speak up about this? I can tell you why. Once you fight for resources for your children, you're exhausted. This became a second full-time job for me. Most parents feel I've gotten what I can for my child and I'm done fighting, but I don't operate that way. I'll speak up for the children whose parents either can't or won't speak up. We can do better and we must do better. What are we going to do to provide our quarantined children with the education they so deserve? I implore you to reinstate live streaming for children that have no choice of their own, are forced to learn at home as a result of COVID exposures and mandatory quarantines. Thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to positive changes for all of our children.
Thank you very much for coming. On the bottom of page 2, number 3 is business items, consent agenda A, B, and C. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Isernia, seconded by Mr. Scavo. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 4 on page 3 is personnel, teachers, consent agenda A through R. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Reynolds, seconded by Mr. Baumann. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Please.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize a few folks on the agenda this evening that were in the instructional personnel. We had the retirement of an English teacher, Miss Stella Anziano, who has been over in the Samoset Middle School working with our middle school students over the last 20 plus years. She's been an integral part of the English department, and that department works collaboratively with other departments for writing and creative activities that help our middle school students to explore and enhance their writing, their creative processes, among many, many other things. I've had a lot of interaction with Mrs. Anziano, especially over the course of the last number of weeks. We were surprised that she took this opportunity to retire. We are so very happy for her. We'd like to congratulate her on her decision to retire, to thank her for her many years of dedication to our Sachem students. And when asking her what she plans on doing into retirement, she's just taking a moment to think about all the fun and great things that she'd like to explore in her new opportunity for retirement. So we'd like to congratulate Stella Anziano on that. We also had the appointment of tenure for one of our teacher assistants, Barbara Miskowski. She has been an integral part of our instructional approach within our buildings over the years and has served in many leaves. So congratulations on tenure for her. And lastly, we had appointed this evening a probationary special education teacher who hails from North Babylon, Jennifer Croft. She's been hired in special education to be one of our BCBA specialists, a behavioral consultant in the district, enhancing our consultant services for students and parents and staff. So congratulations to Jennifer. Welcome to Sachem.
On page 9, number 5, personnel support staff, letters A through K. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Reynolds, seconded by Mrs. Pickowitz. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Okay, once again on tonight's agenda, we have some other big shoes to fill in our support staff services. I'm going to ask Mr. Casano, because I want to take an opportunity to kind of just step up. We'd like to recognize him this evening. He was just approved for his Board of Education retirement. Mr. Casano is our Assistant Director for Security. He has been here since 2008, and he made his way up the ranks here in security for very good reasons, because he's a dedicated worker, he's an authentic person, and he's very, very thorough. This is not his only job. He also works in Miller Place in a leadership role as a head groundskeeper there. We will miss him greatly. We want to thank you for all of your time and dedication, the texts during the nights, making sure to let us know if something's up or not going on, the help. And you've always been a gentleman and a kind soul. And thank you for all the great things that you've done. We will miss you. And congratulations.
Mike, if I could just jump in. The first night I arrived here in Sachem, my wife and kids in the car, one of the first people I met Big Al and I met Mike. And such a gentleman, such a good person to be around. Welcomed us immediately to the Sachem family and I felt like this is someone that had great character and strength to his person. And just, Mike, thank you so much for being here every night, all those nights, for everything. Thank you so much over the years. Thank you.
Also on the agenda, we had Mr. Ed Miller, who is our Director of Facilities 3. He has put in for his retirement. Ed has been here as an employee of the district since 1995. He too came in under different positions, and he made his way up from maintenance mechanic positions to an assistant plant facilities administrator, and ultimately, after covering for our plant facilities administrator, became the Director of Facilities 3, which is actually a state-run examination. This is a position that, once again, is 24/7 when there are emergencies and, electric or, poles go down or heat and pipes burst, or when there is a snow emergency. He is the guy to make sure to work with John O'Keefe and Dr. Pelletieri to make sure our facilities are up and running and to make sure that our employees are there to clear the sidewalks, haul whatever safety areas are there to make sure that our students and our staff are safe. We'd like to thank him for all of his time and dedication and wish him all the very best in his retirement as well.
On the bottom of page 12, it's contracts, consent agenda A through K. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Baumann, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? Please.
Question. So let me just get there. I'm sorry.
No, take your time.
Chris, maybe you can answer this. I know we had the draft contract and it's final now for KSYSL. Is that community use piece that we talked about in there, or is that not in there?
So there's, again, you have two components to that. One is the termination of the existing lease, and then you have the rollover of the new lease pursuant to the RFP. The new lease tracks every piece of the existing lease that was with the consortium. All of the traditional terms that you would expect, a lot of it would be kind of, you might call it boilerplate or something like that, but with the following things extracted: the references to the consortium, the references to, the prior lease arrangement, and substituted in there, obviously, are the terms and conditions that you authorized back in July. There are community use of facilities things, and in Appendix, I believe it's A, you can see the use of facilities policy is actually appended to it. I understand that in the lead up, there was some discussion with another community group to actually join on in a formal way, and that community group opted not to do that. But there remains the opportunity for there to be usage. Obviously, the district would have to approve it and so forth. So that is within the lease. It was embedded within the old lease as well, but that is a permissible use for them to have other community groups on there.
Members or groups want to come,
Yeah, now
they go through SYSL or Sachem.
they would have to go through SYSL and Sachem both. So it's our community use of facilities policy that would be there. And the commitment is that, there would be, for community use, I don't think you're talking about a problem, but for kind of the more aggressive uses that would be like tournaments and things like that that might cause damage to the fields, obviously there would have to be side agreements about how to use that sort of thing.
Right. But so when I read it, I just wasn't clear. If a community group goes to use it, they have to go through SYSL.
They do, because
obviously,
SYSL is
to
the
make
leaseholder.
sure it's available.
Right.
And then are they paying what we would charge a community group, or is SYSL determining, like, let's say they want to charge $5,000 or something, are they determining their own fees for our own
I
community
think that would
groups?
depend on the usage, if there was a more commercial use or a community use. If it's a traditional community use of
community use.
facilities, you know, the group of us want to get together and have a soccer game and kick a ball around a field, there's the provisions of the use of facilities that are in there. And obviously you need the indemnification included in that for you know, the other insurances and things like that. But
Right, so
certainly,
these are use groups that use our other fields. So if they want to request from SYSL and it's available, my
right,
question,
it's going to go through it's SYSL is going to have the right and the usage of the right under, as the leaseholder, they have the right to say, look, it's not going to fit within what we do. You know, we either we're using it or we're seeding it, or the use is going to be too damaging. But
or
it's
they can
envisioned that,
just decide on the fees. They're not going to go by SACHM fees for our youth groups.
well, again, I think it envisions that if there were community groups, true community groups, kids, dads kicking the balls around, that wouldn't be an issue.
But
if
that's
there's,
not in the contract,
well, again, what's there is that they are the leaseholder. They did the RFP and they have the lease.
correct? Right.
Yeah, and we talked about a couple of different
Right, if
iterations
they're
of this.
paying a
So,
lot less than other people that
Understood.
put in, it was going to be so.
but
other
where we
SACHM
landed after the RFP was that they were the sole winner of the, if you want to call it winner, they were the sole award for the RFP. They have the leasehold to that field. There are provisions in there that permit the opportunity for people to get it, but they certainly have the right to say no if it doesn't fit within their leasehold and their
So
rights.
let's say it
under the
is, let's say a SEPTA group that wants to do a lacrosse, thing where SACHM coaches are working with special ed kids, and SYSL wants to charge $5,000 for the use of a Saturday. That would be acceptable. We would have no say because they're the leaseholder.
I think ultimately we couldn't force them to take a group, but I think the idea is that it would be a community group that we would work with for something like that. And there is, again, in Appendix A, the reference to our use of facilities policy for community groups. But they are, just to be very clear, Lori, you're absolutely right. They are the leaseholder. They are, the individuals have the right to the field. They are the ones who have the right to, say that that's a use that's inconsistent, or, by way of example, there was some discussion about, like lacrosse tournaments and things like that, where the field gets torn up in a way that it can't be rehabilitated and would be detrimental to their use. So even if the field was quote unquote available because the SYSL wasn't running their events on that date at that time, that use would be one that would be detrimental to their ultimate program, because the reseeding and fixing of the fields would be an issue. They are charged with the maintenance of that. They have the sprinklers, they have all that sort of stuff. So it is, I know that there are many iterations of this that we discussed where there was both.
I see you mentioned the community use, but
Mhm.
we can mention it in here. But again, as the leaseholder.
Can't force it down anybody's throat. They're the leaseholder.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
There was a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. On the top of page 16, number 7 is field trips. Letter A, approval of field trips for the 2021 school year. Robotics is going up to Albany. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Scavo, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 8 is Committee on Special Education, Consent Agenda A and B. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Isernia, seconded by Mr. Scavo. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 9 is monthly reports. Do we want to start with please,
Start with the legislative committee. You guys hear this?
if you maybe just get a little bit closer.
Okay, we'll start with the legislative committee. So Laura and I had a meeting with the legislative committee about a week or so ago. And what we talked about last time with the board, and what the board charged us with, was to set up the elected officials forum, if you will, right? So we've had the discussion, good conversation with the committee. We landed on a date of March 16th. We're coordinating that with the PTA council. Okay. The reality is, I think the board and the committee members are going to have to do a lot of the preparation and coordination with the PTA, but we're willing to do that. So, Laura, anything else to add? I think, again, good conversation. We've got to have the invitations created, sent out to the local elected officials. And
Right. I think it went very well. advocating for what they want and actually having dialogue with elected officials. They were the committee was very positive with that. In speaking to Annie Favis, so she's Sachem PTA Council President. They're going to be in the midst all their resources in planning what used to be called sports night. It's now being called game night, and that's going to take up a lot of their time. But she did sit in on a PTA workshop for a legislative forum. She is collaborating with us, but as far as helping us or co-hosting it with us, she said PTA has never done it in the past, ever. It's always just been done through the board committee. So she will help us along the way, but as far as having members there or whatever, because they'll be doing game night, Sabrina, I think you can speak to that, because she said she was going to speak. If anybody wants to get involved in PTA, they can, but they're going to have their hands full. I spoke to Doug Smith. I spoke to Anthony Piccarello. I spoke to Leslie Kennedy, and I spoke to Lee Zeldin's aide, Ben, and everybody seemed pretty positive because, again, having dialogue with the community, they feel is important. We discussed even having hybrid, where those who can't come in person can come and like Zoom in. And then those who are in person, we're going to have RSVPs, so people RSVP for the event. And, you know, Dana Playton ran it for many years, and Dana and I have a good working relationship. So she's going to also help along the way.
One of the things we're going to do, Laura, right, we talked about is try to solicit the questions in advance. We don't want this to be a gotcha session, if you will, for elected officials. So we want to kind of get the questions in advance, sort of separate them, all different topics from, you know, state aid, curriculum, anything they want to talk about, sort of separate them that way. So that's the goal.
When we discussed this as a group, we had said, we had mentioned the PTA council, because similar to like the Meet the Candidates night, they're almost like an impartial third.
Right.
Who, if they're not going to be involved, who's going to MC or host the night? I would say it shouldn't be one of us. Maybe we can
Okay.
get somebody from off the board to do it. That's just my
Yeah,
opinion. But
we
maybe
have very good
we're
committee members.
you know, we're setting up the night, but maybe it
Right.
just shouldn't be.
Yeah, I
That's a
would
good
never
question.
moderate.
Yeah.
So.
But just to maybe bring back
Go
to the
ahead,
group.
Sabrina.
Well, the last PTA council meeting that I attended, they had someone as a chairperson.
Right.
I had
so-
sent the name to a few people on the board. Just, is he still running it? Is he still doing a part for the PTA for that?
Right, so they'll Zoom in, but how much, Annie had said, how many people or resources they can commit to this. She'll help us, like how you
Right.
guys set up Meet the Candidates night, do it the same way. But because you're rolling out the new game night, they're going to be tied up with that, but they will join in on the Zoom calls and help coordinate it that way.
I'm wondering if that gentleman maybe could be the host of it.
Yeah.
The person
Yeah,
that chose to
that
be the
would be
head from the
great.
PTA, and he could host it. So then we're not a
Yeah,
part of
we're
that
not
piece,
involved.
planning it, opening up the doors, but then that person who's a representative
over.
from the PTA council could be the person who hosts it.
That would be awesome.
I think that's great.
Good idea.
Yes.
Please.
Also, two things. Where are we planning to have this?
We've had them here, and we've also had them in the Little Theater, right? Was it
I think they have an auditorium.
and maybe in the auditorium.
Depending on the size, I mean, this
So-
might be a more, better.
Right.
lighting, you know.
It depends. I think this might be better attended because of all the issues going on. So that's why we're going to have an invitation. Annie said, Jean, if sign up or something is free. And this way we know how many people and that they submit their questions ahead of time. So, you know, we've had them here where there was only 20 people. So if we would have been in an auditorium with 20 people, you know, it would have looked, so that's why we're planning that. And with the live streaming now, I think it's going to be great for our community to actually see and be able to, you know, log on and see and submit questions ahead of time if they can't come.
I think the other thing is, I forget who said who's going to the legislative breakfast in February, right? I think are we all going? A bunch of us. So I think that's going to raise some interesting issues for us to raise with them, right? Because what we hear out of them, you know, we probably haven't heard yet. And by then the budget's already started, and I guess
Right.
the executive part is out, right, John? That's early January, the executive budget.
Yeah, usually by January 15th or so.
So we'll see the executive budget before we go to that legislative breakfast, right? So we'll have an idea.
So we had like the legislative breakfast is a great way for us as board members, superintendents, students, but our community doesn't go to that. So this is like bringing that to our community.
Well, hoping that'll raise some good issues to raise with them, right? With our meeting.
If I could just, I know there's a bunch of, good number of board members that haven't been to that along with legislative, breakfast or forum. But the way they do it is they do it very similar, is they solicit questions, okay?
Right.
And you have to have those questions in. And if a question pops into your head, okay, in the middle of the meeting. So, for example, we lost $16 million a year because we didn't submit a question a month in advance. They would not allow me to speak. They would not allow me to speak on gap elimination. What we might want to do is we might want to reach out to a community to find out what is the 5 top questions that if we have to propose a question, the board member has to propose a question at the legislative forum, what would it be? So we can pose it, and at least we can come back to our community and say, look, these are the questions we pose. We might only get one opportunity, one question or 2 questions.
That's a great idea.
But these are the answers, because if you don't, and that's the fine print that they don't tell you. And Allison, that if you don't get your question in like in a month in advance, they don't really care who you are. They don't care how state budget decisions affected, your district. We have to get in. And so we might want to find out what that golden question is that, the community would want us to ask, and maybe ask that question at that forum, but we'd have to submit it early.
Right. And Allison, how did we remember when we had our students actually go and ask the questions?
Right.
How was that done?
Yeah, on the registration form for the breakfast, it does require us to submit those questions. And then I believe that they pick from that whole, all the collective questions that are turned in. So yeah,
So the students actually got picked?
they did, yes.
Okay.
Good.
What is the deadline to let them know when?
I believe it's the first week of January.
Right, so that's coming up quick.
The only other question I have, our legislative forum here that we're planning, what was the date of that?
March 16th.
March 16th, okay.
And again, Laura coordinated that really around, started with Doug Smith, right?
Right.
To get him down, and then kind of branched out from there. And that's the first real opening from his legislative calendar in Albany. So.
Right. So we laid like the legislative calendar and then the Sachem calendar, which, has a million things on it. And he said March 17th. I said, there's no way. So March 16th was the day.
So if numbers start to rise to the point where, the New York State governor decides that we're not allowed to meet, do we have a backup plan for a Zoom call or,
We
Yeah.
discussed having it full Zoom.
Okay, great, perfect. Thank you.
Alex, could I just jump in on the budget committee?
Sure.
We did have a meeting.
Yeah, we're going to go through all the committees, so please,
Perfect,
it
okay.
doesn't matter which one goes first.
Yep, okay. So from the budget committee, we did meet. Unfortunately, we only had 3 members attend. So what we took them through. I took them through all of the different things that this board suggested. Ron joined us as well, Ron Sachs. We laid out our goal, which was to kind of piggyback on when Mr. O'Keefe does the budget presentations to the board. We'll meet the next day and go through that. They seem to be in alignment with that. We're going to meet again on January 6th. We're hoping to get the full committee. This way we can elect the chairperson and go from there. Okay. So that's really all to report right now. Some of the topics that we talked about was of interest, but I think it really was the consensus of this committee as well, that I think we probably need to be a little bit more conservative this year, just based on the things that the district needs to do with the new teachers for the 9th period day. So they're okay with what we've proposed, which is just take a look at Mr. O'Keefe's presentation, go through it, and ask questions and things like that. Okay. So that's how we'll proceed.
Who wants to talk about the health and safety or security committee?
Well, actually, there was a bunch of topics. I'm going to turn it over to Patty, because she did facilitate the meeting. But some of the topics that were discussed tonight with the Health and Safety Committee, as well as the district-wide Safety Committee, was everything from some of the issues that we've been dealing with regards to unauthorized, individuals on a school bus. These threats that are becoming more and more common, not only throughout Long Island, but throughout the state and the country. But recess security, school ID cards, some of the concerns with TikTok and those threats. But I'm going to turn it over to Patty because I think there was a recommendation of the committee that this board needs to consider very, very soon as a policy. So I'm just going to turn it over to Patty real quick just to give us an overview, and then I'll share what the recommendation is.
The committee spoke about ID cards for all secondary students, making them a mandatory thing that easily identify our students when they're on the bus, in the buildings. It would just become a part of everything they do daily. We talked about having different colored lanyards per grade level to identify students so you'd know more where they're supposed to be in the building. If you have hallways that are for your sixth graders, hallways for your ninth graders, if there was a senior in that hallway. So the people on the committee would like to make the recommendation that the board make this a policy that all students, for consistency and enforcing it, would be required to be wearing their IDs every single day.
I mean, given the times, the concern is that given the times that we're in right now, this has been something that was introduced in years past, and building principals got a lot of pushback on it. And the reason why they got a lot of pushback on it is that it was not a board policy, and there was no consistency from school to school. So, individuals from one school would complain, well, how come that school doesn't have to wear it and we have to wear it? I think making it a policy, especially during the times that we're living in right now with, active shooters and constant threats and, unauthorized entries on buses, a child would have to show their ID, okay, to enter the bus. In the school, they'd have to, make sure that ID is available as well. Getting on the bus, getting, off the bus, it's very important because putting this measure in, is really trying to reduce the possibility of what occurred December 8th, where, 2 adults got onto a bus and actually rode for, a couple of stops with our children. So the recommendation from the committee is to make it a formal policy, as, for security measures. Another level of security is to make sure that these IDs are worn all the time, possibly with the bus route on the back of it. They do already print their schedules, so they put the bus route on the back. So at any given time, bus driver could, make sure that the student's supposed to be on the bus. I know the concern has come up is, well, what happens if a student forgets their ID? Is the backup plan would be to have the possible list of students that are supposed to be on that bus, where the student would identify their name, they would check the list off to make sure, and then the student would have to report to get a temporary ID card in the office, all right, or possibly a permanent one if it's lost. So those were the recommendations, but the board would have to do it in the form of policy, probably something that we'd have to implement pretty quickly to be able to do it. And it would be district-wide, so that there's no different interpretations in different buildings of what's acceptable.
Secondary level, Mr. Scavo, right? Middle schools and high schools?
Yeah, elementary school recommendation too?
No, the recommendation was for
Secondary
secondary.
only, okay.
And again, just a comment, right? The fact that it's got to be a policy brings consistency, which is going to be a conversation we're going to have shortly, right? And I think that was important. I think we had a lot of head shaking on the call, which was, it's got to be a policy. It's got to be consistent across so it's enforceable.
The only thing I would add to that, and if we could look into this, and I know we had a quick discussion about it, is that a lot of universities, a lot of SUNY colleges and CUNY colleges actually use an alert system to notify parents that sign up for the alerts for that university, that in the event that there's an emergency situation at that particular campus or university, a call would go out immediately, a text message, would go out immediately to parents indicating that there is an alert at the campus, this is what the situation is, stay tuned. I think communication, okay, is very important in making sure that, people understand that, we're sharing with them as quickly as we possibly can, what's going on and that their children are in safe hands, whether it's a lockdown, a lock-in, whatever the case is, evacuation. I think it's important, and look, I'm not looking to spend more money because we do have some expenses next year, but if we can at least get some information on to what something like that would be, maybe separate from Remind, because every time we get a Remind call, we don't know if it's a youth organization that's telling us practice is canceled tonight, or a teacher telling us this homework, something specific to an alert, emergency alert.
Right. Does Remind come up on your phone though? Like,
If you
Yeah.
have the app and the alert turned on.
Okay.
There's like notifications, certain levels of notifications that have to be turned
Right,
on.
because when, again, it was a long time ago, when I used to have it, it used to like pop up on my phone, but I guess it doesn't do that for
Well,
everybody.
Well, it does, but I think what happens is, at least in my case, you get dull to these things, right? So you get a lot of reminds and you run the risk of just ignoring it, right? So.
Like, for example, when there's a weather alert, your phone will buzz differently and say, hey, there's alert, but it would only be used for an emergency alert. So I'm not saying it has to be implemented immediately, but maybe look at, the feasibility of doing something like that moving forward to see whether or not it's a viable thing for our district.
I'm going to just chime in there just because this came up in a couple of the committee meetings I went to is on the terms of communication. We use eSchool data, and then we have some teachers use Remind and some teachers use this, and we have Google Classroom. That, one of the things that I was going to bring up to Dr. Pelletieri is, can the district look into programs that integrate with one another? So some districts use Infinite Campus that integrates with Parent Square. You have eSchool. Someone suggested that in their district, it goes with Canvas. So you have this upload of all the information that if I want to reach a parent, I'm going to the app on my phone, or I'm going to Parent Square, I'm clicking the kid's name. It could send an email to the kid, to the parent, send it out, boom, it's done. I don't have to go to like 10 different locations to try to put out messages to the community. Did you share that where you are something, or Canvas goes with eSchool data, just where it's this kind of looking into the technology that works together to get this communication out? Because I think every single committee meeting I went to tonight, whether it was the on the agenda, it came up. People are just very frustrated with the communication and so many different places we have to look to try to find that. So if that's possible, that maybe those notifications, if we have a system that works together, that's integrated, we're not having to send the information out in a robocall, in an email, posting it on the web page. If there's something that integrates together, that just makes it easier to get out to the community.
Please.
Yeah, I'll piggyback what Sabrina just said. We use Infinite Campus at Three Village as well, and they're all connected. So you have IAP Direct, Go Guardian, Parent Portal, everything is on one. And I think we were hearing last night at the curriculum committee that at least one of the parents was saying how hard it is to navigate where everything is. And so it might be something to look at.
So, Chris, would we need a motion if we wanted to, implement this as a policy, or direct administration put together a policy that would require, ID to be worn, especially entering the bus and throughout the day in the buildings?
Yeah, so I think you can ask administration to draft a policy for your review through the normal process. You don't have to take a motion or a vote on it now. Just if there's consensus among the board that that's a direction you want to go in, and you want to see what a policy would look like, so you could kick around some yays or nays in that, as part of your normal policy review, that'd be a fruitful way to progress.
Do you have any concerns with those recommendations from the committee? No? Are we comfortable with directing administration to put together a policy? All right.
Good. Anyone else have any updates? Diversity, curriculum?
We had the ninth period committee today.
Ninth period.
Mrs. Hines and Mr. Reynolds attended. Again, just kind of looking through the survey that went out. We discussed how the survey is going to go out one more time, right, Mrs. Hines? And then one of the suggestions I had made is maybe if one department, I don't want to pick a department. I said social studies. I don't want to target anybody, but just to put it into their Google Classroom in the stream, the link, there were a lot of parent suggestions and not as many student. So we don't know if maybe they didn't get it, or they just, kids are busy, with schoolwork, AP classes, that they didn't have the time to fill it out. But just one more chance before we kind of wrap that up and they finalize those courses and then start writing the curriculum for them. I think the only other thing was the clarification. I don't know if Mrs. Hines, if you could just speak to it again, why we are doing this 9 periods. They had a couple of people on the committee had put out there that wasn't clear as to why we are doing this.
Yeah, thank you. So we had discussed it at the board presentation, but we're going to update the survey so that it just is mindful again to our community, families, and then obviously the students, that the first and foremost, the reason why we are moving to a full 9-period schedule is because of the hours that need to be had at the state level, which is 990 hours. So that's first and foremost. And then obviously we would want to expand upon our programs to give the best, possible education for our students. But we don't want folks to think that we're just choosing a 9-period just to give kids extra school. It's hand in hand with the 990 hours, and then our wish to, build a robust program for the students.
Any questions? Any other updates? Good. We do have someone for public comment. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I apologize that I can't read your last name, so Cynthia, please. That's okay. How do you say it? Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to quickly touch base on what I spoke about the last time I was here, and that was for a process for children who are academically advanced to be granted grade acceleration. After I was done speaking, Dr. Pelletieri mentioned a program for a Gifted for All program, and it sounds really nice. I like it. I'd be the last person in this room to go against inclusivity. But that's great for everyone. But I'm talking about a specific set of children, which is children who are so far advanced from their grade level that their grade level isn't appropriate for them. So what I'm speaking about is not a program, it's a process where we can determine if that child is socially adept enough to go into the next grade, and if they are actually academically advanced enough where their current grade can't provide them the interest to keep them interested and motivated. And I say that because I have personal experience in that. And I'm asking for this process because I know sometimes it sounds really nice that you have a gifted child or you have a child that's really smart. So people think, it's simple for you and, you have it easy. It's actually pretty hard. I have both. I have a child who has an IEP, and I know some of you have mentioned that you have children who are in special education. And I can say that the challenges are very similar, where you have to keep their interest, you have to keep them engaged. And I find that with both. I'm sorry, I don't know why I shake so much with public speaking, but I'm not nervous, I don't know. Anyway, so I meet challenges with both of them. And I could probably speak about one of them because they're no longer in the Sachem School District. And he was coming home very frustrated. He was angry. He's a super nice child. And he just couldn't do it. I was fortunate enough to have the means to have options, whether it was homeschooling or, schooling him elsewhere. Fortunately, I had that option. But I'm speaking for the parents who don't. Having an IEP for my other child, it helped me a lot. Mrs. Haynes, you were instrumental years ago with that. And she's where she needs to be. There are other kids, like I said, if you're looking at the bell curve, they're just as exceptional as the children with the IEPs, but they don't get any kind of specialized attention. They kind of just go in with everyone else and they're not meeting their needs with that. So the Gifted for All program, it's nice, but it doesn't address that specific area of children who go largely unattended to. The last time I spoke, before I even reached back to my chair, a parent came up behind me and she said, I've been asking for this almost 20 years ago. And when I went out, another woman came up to me, and then another lady came up to me, and she told me about this boy who graduated at the top of his class, and he got a full ride to, I think he graduated valedictorian, and he got a full ride to, I won't say where, but it's a Long Island school. He flunked out that first year. Why? Because he did not know how to meet the challenges of that school. He didn't have the tools because he skated through, elementary, high school, he skated through. So he didn't have those tools that he needed when he met a challenge. I was actually watching something the other day, and the main character said that, the funny thing about being really smart is that you go through life without really trying. So when it's time to rise up to the occasion, you don't really have the tools to do it. We need to give these kids who seem like they're doing great, we need to give them those tools, and we need to meet their needs. And it's not through a Gifted for All program. That's it.
Thank you very much. Letter B on number 10 is board discussion items. There are two. We'll start with consistency across the district. I'm not sure who wants to start. Vinny, please.
Yeah, I could start because I actually asked for this conversation, so thank you, Alex. Dr. Pelletier, let me just ask you a question. You've been here about 18 months now. Can you give us your perspective on what you've seen in terms of consistency across the district?
We are consistent in some areas and not, we are consistently inconsistent.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, good. You're right. So one of the things I wanted to see is, we should talk about how do we bring a consistent model across all of our buildings, right? And, one of the things I'm looking at here is I actually printed out student handbooks at the secondary level, right? Both for the 2 high schools and then the 3 middle schools. And as you comb through them, they seem similar, but there's enough inconsistencies, whether it's attendance policies, whether it's disciplinary items, things like that. Sometimes board policies are getting mixed in, which may not be board policies. So one of the things I'd like to, put on the floor to consider is how do we now start? Maybe we start with student handbooks, or maybe it's academics, right? Because that's another conversation, right, that we've heard from parents around consistency at the academic level of elementary. But we talked about our code of conduct, and maybe there's an opportunity to start bringing some of that together with consistent student handbooks at a board level, but then also give the buildings the autonomy and flexibility they need, right? With maybe it's east or north specific policies, and then take it down to the classroom. And then obviously the teachers have some autonomy in their classroom to have their classroom rules, right? Because I think there's just different rules across the board. So I'll stop there and pause and see if anybody else has that concern or questions or.
Yeah, I'll address that moment if you don't mind, and
Yeah.
then we can continue the conversation. The opportunity that we have in front of us, we've talked about board vision and goals. One of the things was this code of character that we wanted to bring together.
Right.
And I think that's a couple year type of
Yes.
project. We're going to get a lot of input from a lot of constituencies. And I think that is a prime opportunity for us to create a vision, a singular type of vision for the district that can move forward.
Mhm.
And so Seneca might have a different cover because there's a Seneca and there's
Right.
a Samoset and there's a Sagamore, but there should be consistency within there underlying in terms of expectations, in terms of grading policies, in terms of a lot of that goes on there in terms of the discipline that takes place and expectations that take place. Yes, we want our schools to have autonomy, right? Schools often they reflect the nature and the character of the principal and what those visions and goals are. But there needs to also be an adherence to and an understanding that we are part of a larger family and a larger focus, and that is the Sachem district itself.
Right.
And so we have to work within that realm.
Right.
So I think that's a great opportunity for that. So I keep pointing at you, Patty. I'm sorry, but that's something I know that you're
And
kind of
to-
heading up.
Yeah, and to your point, right, with the buildings, that's what kind of maybe makes East special in their way, North special in their way. Give them some autonomy there. But again, up a level at a board and district, perspective, we should have consistency.
It's kind of
Maybe it's high school, middle school, elementary, and maybe there's some that kind of span all the buildings.
It's kind of like curriculum. We have curriculum, kind of ownership on curriculum. It's a district level curriculum that our teachers write it oftentimes. So they take part in that. The delivery of that curriculum should be the teacher's own. I did it this way, you do it that way. I'm going to use this video. You're going to use this Google Classroom piece. You're going to use it in another piece. That's fine as long as at the end of the day, it's that curriculum that's being delivered. It's not, well, I know we have that curriculum, but I'm going to do this other thing because I've done it for several years and it's really great.
Right.
Like we need to come to grips with that we're going to do something that is so there is this consistency where you don't have a school where we get concerns raised. And, this has happened over the years, concerns raised about delivery of certain instruction, certain curriculum, and then we look at it like, wow, that's really not what we've been doing or thought we were doing, and we need to make sure that we check on that.
And again, this is something that's, years and decades in the making, where you get further and further away from sort of the gold standard, if you will, right? Drift. So how do we bring it back in and then sort of monitor it and manage it going forward, right? So
Then when you talk about consistency, what exactly are you looking at for, because even when you just said that, now if we started to give autonomy to each building, I feel like it's going to stray away from the book. So what,
So,
for example, name one thing consistent
so let's look at,
inside the meat and potatoes of it, not just like what it says on there.
Yeah, so let's talk about, we had this issue come up at the middle school level with requirements for honor society, right? They were inconsistent across the board. One school had a little bit harsher, disciplinary issues, right? Those types of things. The other one here is when you look across at attendance policies, each high school has a different attendance policy. And when you compare it to the board's policy, it's different. That's what I'm talking about. So let's just take this example of a student handbook, right? Perhaps it's, here's the Sachem East Hilltop Herald, which is great. It sort of gives the character of Sachem, right? But how about in the beginning of it, we have all sort of the board policies, whether it's on attendance, whether it's academics. You guys tell me what those policies are. We can go through them, right? Those should all be consistent across both high schools. Then you get to North. Maybe North has some other policy. Name it. I don't know. Whatever, Mr. Larson wants to do in that school, it's specific to North, or Mr. Antonetti has it East, right? Again, it shouldn't stray too much from the board policies, if you will, but they're going to do things a little bit differently at each school to deliver the curriculum, right?
It can't be inconsistent. It can't be
inconsistent. Comb through these, there's, they may look the same, but there's inconsistencies, right?
It's like having state law violate or go against the federal law, right? We can't have those types of inconsistencies.
And then, one example was, when you go to open house, open school night, at the secondary level, you're going to 8 different classes. And I get it. Each teacher has the, different way of doing it. But within some of the handouts you get, there's, stuff, hey, this is a board policy. You can't do this. Well, when you look it up, it's not a board policy, right? So we just need to, things are getting embedded in. We just need to maybe pull back what's a true board policy, right? What does the building need to do? And then what does the classroom need to do, right?
I could add one piece here because it's an opportune time. The board faced something earlier this year in terms of consistency around National Junior Honor Society. Did I say that right? Yes. And I always mix those up. And there was a concern one building would allow kids who may have had a discipline record to appeal and be still part of that society, and others might not have. You charged us with going back and making that consistent. Ms. Trombetta did that with the 3 principles. That is now in a consistent policy that will be part of a handbook. That is something that we'll do across the board. So there was an opportunity for consistency that you asked for and that we've been able to build, and we'll continue to look for opportunities to do that. And again, I think through the code of character is going to be a great opportunity to be able to do that widespread.
So Alex, just one more example, right? You have consequences for inappropriate behavior. One school has 16, one school has 17. There's some difference, some don't have it. Those are the types of things I think just
that's what I was I don't have that in front of me. That's why I was asking.
Those are the types of things as you kind of get into these documents that, again, and I'm not suggesting we say what this says. I just suggest consistency. What it says is up to the administration, right, to kind of create those, right? So
is that something that maybe you guys can sit down with the building principals and make one cohesive group for the high schools, one for the middle schools, and just make it the same?
Yes, sir. That is exactly the vision for why we want to do.
It's not an easy fix, right? I mean, I see a little bit.
It's going to take some time. Yes.
We have built with.
Yes.
It's heavy lifting, right?
We have a little bit of a list. It's Rob, Mike, and then Jim.
Vinny, I understand what you're saying. I work in a school where there's 4 different buildings, and sometimes you get frustrated because, for certain kids, they have different requirements for excused absences than other kids, and look, a child's family member dies and the school writes a letter and the kid's excused, but another kid that has a similar one does not. So I think when we talk about consistency, I think we need to take some of the big things that have to be consistent across the board, such as the attendance policy, excused absences, student discipline policies, dress code policies, requirements for national honor societies have to be consistent. Maybe even electronic device policy, where a kid might get 2 days of ISS for having their phone out in one school, but not in another school. I mean, if we're going to use them as tools and they're not going to be a distraction to the educational process, I'm not saying that, that should be the end all, but at least if there's going to be any disciplinary, consequences, that they be consistent. And I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob, yes.
Good. Mike?
Well, actually, you all beat me to the punch. Even I had my hand up. What I was going to say, I for lack of a better analogy, I kind of think of this as in terms of the Navy, right? The Chief of Naval Operations, he has his ships, they have their captains, and those ships take on they usually take on the personality of their COs, which would be your principals, right? But yet you have to drive down the uniform policy, the training, right? The uniforms, all that stuff. So what I would suggest is, and I guess we're getting ready, middle of this year already, but at some point, maybe after the budget's done, get together with your cabinet and at least your middle school principals at first, and your middle school and high school principals, and come up with that list of things that we're just talking about, attendance policies and discipline policies, and come back to us and say, these are the things that we're going to start to uniformly address. And that's going to be uniform across all the schools, right? So therefore, their handbooks would start with those things that are uniform. So everybody's on the same playing field. And then there will be things that Lawson will do different than Antonetti, that Salvia will do different than Haran. That's okay. Those things are okay. That's their building, and that's how they want to run it. But as the Chief of Naval Operations, there's going to be some level of consistency down to them, right? So that's what I would suggest. Let them come back to us and tell us these are the policies we're going to start to align.
Good. Jim? Okay. Sabrina?
Well, do you remember one of the first conversations we had where we were on the board was this exact conversation? Consistency, curriculum needs to be consistent. Rules, procedures need to be consistent. Discipline needs to be consistent. But school culture is going to be created differently in every building. And it's something to be appreciated. It's going to be built by the principal, by the staff. And that's something that I don't want to control. But I think that those things that give every student the same opportunity, the same standards, the same goals, that has to be the same throughout the district. But we have to let pajama day happen in Seneca if it's going to happen. That's stuff that we're not going to control. That's a school culture. That's a school building. What the teachers want, what the students want in those buildings, I think that has to kind of stick with the buildings. But those other things that have been brought up, all of those need to be the same throughout the board, because we shouldn't have a child being disciplined based on one thing on a piece of document that's different than something that's been, at Samoset or East or North. So
Yes.
I think that's one of the first
We talked about
conversations.
similarly
Mr.
situated students should be treated similarly, right? So
My old boss used to say the equal treatment of equals, right? I like that idea, and we'll talk about it and again, touch base in terms of those big pieces. Right. We are not here to produce widgets. We don't want to produce widgets. We don't want everyone being the same, little robots everywhere doing the same thing everywhere. We want that culture built. It's some great pride for our communities. Pajama. I heard a debate today: pajama or pajama.
No, we're
Matthew,
gonna
are
vote
you
no on that.
pajama or pajama?
Can't say Matt's pants right now. Mr. Kiernan?
Yeah, all great points. I was going to say similar things that Rob said. And what Sabrina said is spot on. And that's, you don't want to take away the individual culture of each building, of each neighborhood. I mean, that's important. And on that note, that's whenever anything is decided, Dr. Pelletieri, when you come up with this equity plan, is that it has to be communicated good to the community. So we don't get hit with, how come Merrimack had a party and Cayuga didn't have a party? And, how come the kids over here are doing,
That's
those
not the
kinds
goal
of
of this.
Yeah,
right?
it has to be really spelled out that these things that we're looking for across the board are these particular issues that you mentioned, curriculum and discipline, et cetera.
Anyone else? Good. The next piece is about quarantine support. Who would like to start that? Please.
So we just discussed this in our Health and Safety Committee. And again, I think there is a problem with consistency, that some students, even through today, they're not getting any remote learning support because there aren't teachers available to give it. So if we're going to have a remote learning where we actually have to see feedback, is the 1 hour per class when you're out 6 days equal to the learning you would get if you were in school 6 days? These are kids that came into contact in school with a case and now they're quarantined. So now we have some students getting 0 remote learning because as it's not just parents complaining. Patty, you're going to have to help me with Josephine.
Vasiento.
Clerical are calling to try and get teachers to cover the quarantine. Nobody's getting back to them, and the parents are calling, yelling at the clerical. So your remote learning plan, if it, is going to work, and that 1 hour we're going to say is equal to 6 days in class, can't work if it's not being executed. So to me, that's a problem. There are kids home quarantined and they're not getting any remote learning. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think we have to do better.
The other issue that I got was I got a phone call, and I'm sure there are other courses, but we're only giving them the core subjects. And there are kids that are in like a class like AP Psychology that are getting nothing. Like that is not part of the plan that we put in place. And to be out for 6 whatever days or maybe more, that's a lot of loss. And that kid is going to be behind. And it's not anybody's fault because we can't control these quarantines, although I have my own opinion on it. But we have to find a way to get more kids support for courses they can't miss. Like, if they miss phys ed, if they miss art for a few days, yes, they're going to miss projects, but they can make some of that up. They miss AP Psych. They can't just go on a Google Classroom and teach themselves AP Psych. I know I wouldn't be able to learn like that. So, what plan do we have in place to help these kids out? I mean, maybe our AP Psych teacher is willing to do the work, but in one building, and then we have an issue with, can we get them in the other building? I know that we talked about going out and outsourcing it. And then the complaint that I got today from an email was, well, I don't want a total stranger teaching my kid. I want his teacher doing it. Because what if he teaches different? Or what if it's not the same thing that they're learning? And it's not tutoring. It's got to be, teaching it for the first time. So I don't know. I agree with a lot of what Laura says. That
right. And Alex,
the other
even
issue that I have
again-
is like, we've only, and I appreciate you coming tonight. I do. This is only like the 3rd or 4th or 5th person that I'm hearing from. Like, and then we got numbers, and it shows that a large percentage are receiving the services that they are supposed to be. And of those kids, I haven't really heard much. So I don't know if it's working or if it's not working. If yes, receiving the service is one thing, but how are they doing on exams and how are they
Right.
doing on their work? And that part of the data is kind of missing. Just kind of getting services. I don't know if we have enough data to show if it's working or not. Please.
Yeah, Chris, could you
No, no,
explain in your
sorry.
data? You said there are actually kids who decline the services. What?
Yeah.
Why do they do that, or what do they do if they're not getting their instruction?
They use the Google Classroom. A great many of our secondary students, the parents, when we call and say we're going to set this up, they say, I spoke to my child, or I'm deciding for my child that we don't need additional support beyond what is in the Google Classroom. So they are declining those services. That was a concern that we had initially, and it seems to have bared itself out. They just decline them. So we can't obviously force it on. No, you're going to have to do this. Like we can't do that. So, but we have had it, and it's especially at the secondary level. Sometimes a child is too sick. That's happened also.
I
A parent that says,
but when they
we're
say
not
go
going
on
to do
Google
it. But
Classroom, in other words, they're just going on their classroom.
at the secondary level, they go on Google
teachers-
Classroom. They have the work there, and they have the notes and whatnot, the slides from the presentations and things like that, and they just do the work and hand that work in.
Well, sorry. Okay.
Please, Sabrina, and Mark.
So we got the numbers of the numbers of kids, et cetera. But what was do we have feedback from that? Where parents had, like, I know my kids, one kid was sick, one kid was not. And I think our experience was great. Neither of my children really fell behind. I can't complain about the services, but I know that I've heard from other people who were not happy with it, or the services came too late. Their child was just sitting around for 4 or 5 days, waiting, and again, they got contacted, but they couldn't meet until this day. So they had 3 or 4 days where the kid is just staying home, playing video games, watching TV, that kind of thing. I know the live streaming has been brought up too, but also I know my son who was sick, there's no way he would have been able to sit on a live stream. So the fact that once he was feeling better and rested, he was able to meet up with the teacher for an hour to go over his work, that was good for him. So I don't know if, I'm hearing a lot of different things, but I'm not hearing, enough formally, I guess, to really say what decision or where do we go from here? Is this the best option for our students at this point?
Laura, then Mike, please.
So just to follow up on what Alex was saying, so I think it's inconsistent. And it's not for every class. That's a big drawback. And then Stephanie, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Her son was out 2 times on quarantine, never sick, out 2 times, and he got minimal support and it wasn't enough. And there's a good student who gets good grades. And if there was something that after a student was out, who's giving feedback? The parents that contacted me don't want to give their names. They don't even want to give their building in case the teacher figures out it's them, because they're going to call and say, my son was out in Samoset for 6 days and never got any science, and they're afraid, 6th grade science, the kid is out. If somebody figures out it's that teacher, nobody wants to create waves there. So that's also part of the reason that parents aren't coming forward. But there are kids who are home 6 days that, maybe get 1 hour from one subject, not all the subjects. And again, we don't need parents to tell us because we have our own clerical telling us that's what's happening.
Mike?
I was going to mention in that legislative breakfast, maybe one of the questions we should be asking is about testing out of quarantine, right? Get to shorten up these quarantines that we should be, right now you can't have the kid test out of quarantine,
That's
right?
correct.
So, we think the kid is exposed. He gets a PCR test 3 days later, he gets the results, he's negative, he comes right back.
Yep.
That's something we should be, as a school district, we should be pushing for. Right?
Yeah, please.
Dr. Peltieri, do you think this is systematic or is it isolated incidents, but it sounds like they're popping up here and there?
Well, it's certainly a concern
Yeah.
through Stephanie. I don't know how to say your last name either. I apologize. Mrs. G. How's that? Haralo. I think it's close. Okay. Brought up an important point in that whenever anyone has asked us, for example, and they shouldn't have to go out of their way to ask, but her second job was working with me on trying to make this work. And Patty was right there with us, as the rest of the team was. And we made sure that where there was additional support warranted, requested, needed, we went and did that. We put additional hours and what I would say is we go back and look at this now and we talk about those other subject areas. We do have these federal funds. Mr. O'Keefe has been working with us on making sure we're budgeting this carefully. And this is exactly what those dollars would go to, something like this. It's obviously happening because of COVID. So we would use those dollars to make sure that we're supporting this. We can look in these other subject areas. And I got to tell you, any single time a person has reached out, I've referred them to Patty, and Patty has gone back with those families and those folks and said, well, you want additional, even after the kids are back, we'll give additional hours to help a child get caught up. Now, I am obviously concerned. In December, it's been a lot more cases and a lot more quarantines coming quickly. And it's not just here, it's everywhere. And if we continue at this pace, we may have to make a larger, more wholesale change. We may look at an interim thing we could look at is scheduling days where we know automatically math might be Tuesday, science might be Wednesday, the arts and music, and something might be Thursday. Like we could come up with schedules where we could do more than one-on-one. Right now, a lot of this is one-on-one, which is what allows it to be effective despite the fact that it's several days not having the teacher, because when you're one-on-one, you can obviously accomplish a great deal in that hour.
So what's the process though to get the services?
So-
Is it the onus on the parent to say, hey, my kid is quarantined?
No. We
Or
immediately,
we
teachers
have like
find
sort of
out.
a caseworker
I
to
think,
walk them through it.
Ms. Trombetta, I think that it was spoken to a little bit tonight in your meeting there.
When we first started, it was up to the clerical. Once we deemed a child to be in quarantine, the clerical were reaching out to the teachers. Since then, in many of the buildings, if not all, I would have to follow up. I know from a couple buildings in particular, as soon as this teacher knows, it's now the teacher reaches out directly to the families to set up the quarantine instruction.
So again, as numbers get larger, we have to reflect on this, see that we're being effective. But I will say this loudly, that anyone that is looking for additional support or hours or anything like that, please reach out to Ms. Trombetta's office or my office, your principal, your teachers, and we will work with people in order to make sure that they're getting what they need. It's so disappointing to me to hear when people come up to the mic and say, I've been here for 18 years, I've been here this many years, and you guys are failing me. That's unacceptable to me.
Mike and then Rob.
I'm just going to talk about, you mentioned the federal funds to help with the catch-up of lost educational time. Do we have any situations in schools where a large portion of one class is quarantined? Because I'm just thinking you could use those funds maybe to I don't want to say make them come to school on a Saturday, but you might get parents and kids who, if the teacher would be in agreement, they could come in on a Saturday morning and catch up, spend a few hours together, and we could pay the teacher out of those federal funds for that, obviously. But I guess it would have to be a similarly situated group, right?
When a great many are out, either the entire group is out. We had that at Hiawatha, and then it just became part of our day. So that's how they were able to do it. When right now we have a situation where several kids are out from one section, and that teacher is working with all the kids at the same time. So it becomes more of like a classroom setting instead of the individual, and that's been effective also. So we're trying to be, as flexible as possible. That was a big word for us last year, and that continues to be this year in terms of what COVID is throwing at us.
Yeah, please.
I'm in a district that we, handle quarantines differently, but still in the terms of to get the documentation, I know some people are waiting to get letters from the county or whatnot. I have kids waiting 3 or 4 days to get the okay that they're officially on quarantine. And a lot of times by the time we get things set up, the kids are coming back. It's exhausting and there's nothing perfect. And I agree with you. I hate hearing that we're failing, but I don't think any district has figured this out 100%. And I don't think any of us could say that, we're not trying to do the best for the students. But again, I think hearing from families of their experiences so that we can make the changes to make sure we're trying to give the best to our students, I think that's what we have to continually, ask for and continually reevaluate what we're doing, whether we're hearing the complaints or not, to make sure we are giving the best for the students.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Every time we make a decision, last week we made some kind of decision. I immediately got an email, shot it to the board. Here's an immediate email, the first response. 30 seconds later, I got the exact opposite response. I sent it to the board. Here's the second response. It's is what it is. But as you said, let's continue to strive to do what is best for our kids, always.
Mr. Scavo?
Just to piggyback on what Sabrina said, there are times when we get a request to do remote learning for an individual that maybe gets 2 hours a week. The student is quarantined on a Monday, and we find out on Thursday that they're requesting it, and he's coming back on Monday. And sometimes you have to fit those 2 hours in to be able to accommodate that kid, but you're only given 2 days to do it. So it becomes challenging because sometimes the teachers don't hear of the matter until a day or two before the child's coming back. But something that was discussed in the the district, the safety plan, was that using outside agencies to be able to conduct this, and the answer is that they can't find qualified people to be able to do it. There's a shortage of people that are even applying for those jobs. So that's the other issue. So my question is that now with cases rising, okay, and the greater demand for more remote learning, is it possible that we're going to start running out of staff to be able, and hours in the day to be able to conduct this? Are we able? We have teachers' assistants that are fully certified licensed teachers. Can we tap into them, okay, for learning, okay, under the direction of the teacher
Or even substitute teachers.
or substitute teachers, or even, so I don't want to throw, I'm going to just throw this out there, but student teachers are learning, okay, how to cope and teach in a classroom setting. I got news for you. Any teacher that's going into this industry has to understand how to do remote learning as part of their training, because it's going to be thrown at you at some point in your career. Do we have the ability to utilize either one of the three?
Yes, I'm going to ask Patty to speak to that.
We are utilizing our TAs. We really don't have many student teachers in the buildings at the moment, but certainly they are working with the students. I'm going to pass it over to Kristen, and she'll answer the substitute question.
So unless we had substitute teachers who were dedicated specifically for this purpose, which is a challenge for us to even get for the buildings, we would run into a situation because we have a certain number of scheduled days folks work on a monthly basis. And they're doing that in the buildings to do support for classroom instruction while teachers and TAs are absent.
So we are not allowed to hook them up with like Eastern Suffolk BOCES. And then when we say we're going to outsource it to an agency or group, we could say, hey, listen, we're going to go to this person and you can work that way so you don't go over the hours. And now we have to give you health care, right? Is that what we're concerned about? That they work too much and now we are forced to pay them health care?
Well, we do provide health care opportunities under Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
That's, something that we do provide, but there is a requirement for us to have folks have a number of limited hours.
Yeah.
So whether we dedicate a specific sub for this purpose or a staff for this purpose, that would be the only thing that I would see. So that way we don't run into any other issues because we can't monitor all of that.
I'll
with
just jump
hours.
in and say, Kristen, that we use very, very, very 1%, 5%, Patty, outside agencies when we're doing this. Very little. And our teachers have been able to do it. Now, very concerned that we won't be able to continue that with the pace of what's happening now, and then we might need to utilize more outside. And as you said, even the outside agencies are struggling this year to have people. But we are utilizing those staff beyond the classroom teachers.
Please.
So when I went to that ISLIP meeting, so it was the cluster, the South Shore, I guess it's called cluster. So those districts, at least the ones that spoke, are not doing the live streaming either. So, but to me, if you're, when we get these reports, like for the past 2 weeks of COVID, the numbers of quarantines are so high, I would think it would be easier when you have that large a percentage home to be able to live stream a class than to try and find teachers for that many students. And just as the quarantines go higher, I don't know if it's something that we can work on. And then the second thing is, after a student comes off quarantine, let's say, is there a way we could do almost like an exit survey? How was your experience? What did you think of remote learning? Were you able to get in touch with your teachers? Like something like that. Did you feel like you fell behind? Just something simple that a student or if they're younger, the parent can answer, because without having feedback, how do we know we're doing the right thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just.
Please, Jim.
I'm going to ask a question that it may sound ridiculous. Maybe I should know the answer to this, but why can't live stream just be automatic? If we have the technology to do live stream and some kids in a class are quarantined, why couldn't that just automatically be live streamed? Their classes from that point on be live streamed to those kids that are quarantined.
I can speak to that, and I think for the same reason. For the same reason that the many other districts aren't live streaming either. It's in terms of the quality. As Laura had mentioned, it would be easier perhaps, but we're not going to look for necessarily easier. We're going to look for what we feel is a better product. And having one-on-one instruction from a teacher, we feel thus far is better for our students rather than just simply turning on the camera in the classroom. Last year, a lot of the feedback we did receive at the end of the year was it didn't work for kids that were in class, and it was even tougher for kids that were outside the class. And that was the concern. So we tried to build a better model. And as Sabrina said before, not everyone's doing it perfectly. No one has the perfect answer. A lot of districts are doing what we're doing, as Laura just said, in this quadrant here, trying the same approach, because just feeling that for kids at the technology issues for kids at home, trying to get the teacher to help that child at home. There's 2 kids at home, but there's 24 in class who they're trying to teach as well. It's cumbersome and onerous for our teachers, to say the least. So we're trying to make a better model. And maybe it's not a better model. We're still in the midst of it. We get feedback on both sides, as stated also. But we're trying to do it better. That's why. That's why we didn't just do it.
When you say better, you mean you're saying to me live stream is not better?
Yeah.
Is that what
Again,
you're
the
saying?
feedback we got last year that it wasn't better. It wasn't a good experience for kids in school or at home. And that's why we didn't just go back to live stream. We wanted to try a year later to try something, the things that we learned, to try and do it better.
So, you know how we had the hybrid approach last year? So Sabrina, you brought up an excellent point that I and maybe Stephanie didn't think of. If your child is home sick with COVID, you know, they're not going to be able to get up and live stream, and the 1 hour is going to work. But if your child is just home quarantined with 0 symptoms, sitting there all day, they probably would do better logging into a live stream and having the structure and everything versus maybe getting the 1 hour per subject, only core subjects, for 6 days.
The things I'll do is go back to my folks in these other districts as well. I actually have a meeting Friday, and we could talk about some of some of what they're doing and why they chose to do that, and whether it's successful or not, and whether they're looking at changing some of the things. And we'll certainly go back and look at our model and see where we can make some changes. And as stated before, if it continues at this pace, I don't know if the whole thing's going to be remote at some point, I dare say. Sorry to hear that. Yeah.
So as an educator, if you look at these theoretically, both whether you do the 1 hour tutoring per subject or you do the live streaming, I know the districts that are doing the live streaming, it's just a window. They turn on a camera and they walk away. The kid's not asking questions. They're not, if a kid's coming in late and the teacher's already started teaching, they're not getting into the classroom. This is what's happening in those districts that are live streaming. It's not what it was when we were doing the hybrid last year, where the kids that were home were interacting, answering questions. That's not happening from what I'm hearing other districts. And I might not, I'm only speaking for a few that I'm connecting. So when you think of it like that, it's like, wait, would I rather have my child then with an hour for a teacher that they can go into depth and ask questions? That sounds really great. But then when I also think about it, oh, well, I'd like them to be able to hear what's going on in the classroom and experience with their classmates. That sounds great too. So again, what is the right answer? Because I think in that situation, you're going to have people who are going to say, I like this. I think this is better. I like this. I think this is better. So in theory, they both sound great. But then when in practicum, it could be completely different. And I would love to hear if, you're connected with superintendents throughout Long Island. I would really love to hear both sides, which, and you guys having the conversation of what's really benefiting the students, ultimately.
And as you know, when we talk about consistency was a conversation tonight, we can't offer like a menu, so to speak, and say, okay, you choose that or you choose it. It just doesn't work that way.
Rob?
Chris, when you speak to your colleagues across Long Island, my big concern is if, when the numbers get high enough and we have to, meet the demands of more and more kids that are being quarantined, what is our plan? Like, what are we going to do? What are they going to do? How are they going to address it? Because the thing is when you look at the infection rate now versus a month ago versus 2 months ago, it's climbing. And historically, when we look at the trends last year, they started to climb at Thanksgiving. They got really high in January. They started to come down after February break, and then they spiked again in April. So the question is before we plateau, okay, I think we need to have a plan in place so that how are we going to address it? And look, it might not be our decision. Government might say everybody's going remote, and that might happen. I hope not, but
But it's
thing is
happening in
that-
districts, Mr. Scavo, you're exactly right, a district back in Nassau that I know very well. I wish them luck, right? Had to go to remote for these next couple of weeks. It's unfortunate. We have to stay on. I do want you to know that we're already, you almost have to be a futurist in this job, and we're already having those meetings around remote learning, remote schedules, things like that. We already have those plans being built, unfortunately.
Jim?
Yeah, forgive me again for something I probably should know, but I'm pretty sure of what the live streaming looks like and what that's about. What is the one-on-one? What exactly? Tell me what that is exactly.
It's can't be in person, obviously. So
Right.
it's live stream, teacher at a Zoom on a Zoom meeting or Google Classroom on one side of the screen, right, and the student at home on their laptop, their computer, their device on the other.
And that's for now.
Yes.
Has there, I'm just going to bring up what I brought up before. Has there been discussions on expanding it either per subject or if
Yes.
the kids in multiple AP
Yes.
classes and it's not a core, but it's like an extra class? Can we look to expand to get those kids without them asking, but kind of just say now that let's expand it to those? I mean, we have kids in 4 or 5 AP classes. There's no way that they're getting that kind of coverage when they're home.
We already put feelers out with teachers and with Patty, and those conversations are beginning.
Chris, just one other question. If we have 3 kids in the same math class or history class that's quarantined at the same time, are the kids getting 1 hour individually, or are we able to take and do 3 at the same
Yeah,
time?
we normally would put them together.
We would.
Yeah.
So it would be a small group.
Yep.
Instruction.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any future board discussion items? Please.
Just, if we could, I noticed in one of the reports, there's the reference to the culturally responsive standards. What does that look like? I was wondering if we could have a presentation. What does that mean? I think it was in Erin's report.
Yep.
Sure. Put that together.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Please, Sabrina, then Rob.
I shared with the board in email a letter that my district had written. West Islip has just put out. I have a friend on the board there. It just seems that districts, boards, parents are, I think we all held our breath last time our governor spoke on Friday of what was going to be put out there. And I like the tone of all the letters of speaking that, that if the mandate for a vaccine does come out for our children, what that's going to do for our districts. And that at this point, most districts believe that this should be a decision with a medical decision, not a mandate from the governor. So I don't know what my fellow board members, everybody I know said thank you for sharing it with me, but I would just like to put that out there. I do not want to disrupt any of our students' school year if that's something like that is going to come out. And that's just, again, my personal view. I would like to put that out at the board, in terms for our community.
I don't normally speak during this time, but I will jump in and say this district, pat us on the back, whatever. This district put out a letter back in September, October about not only what was going on then, but looking forward and saying, we don't believe a mandate, that there should be a vaccine mandate. So I know we were one of the first to register that. When people started to talk to me around, hey, this district's doing this now, this district's doing that in December, we want to send something. I know we were on record for a long time now around that. And if we want to remind folks of that, then, certainly. But that letter is on our website. It's on our page, the board correspondence page as well. And I leave that part to you, but I just wanted to let the community know that is something that we talked about back in September, I believe.
Please.
Actually, Sabrina, is exactly what I was going to say. I mean, Alex and I are both in an officers roundtable with other presidents and vice presidents, and all of those districts are putting out a secondary letter because now you're hearing the governor say, "Hey, you know what? If the rates aren't, if 80% of the people aren't vaccinated, children, I'm gonna, there's a chance I may mandate it." And
even districts that don't normally write letters,
yeah.
They are starting to because they understand what the disruption might be.
Yeah, so you start to hear that language from the governor, okay, and it's different than the language, she had 2 or 3 months ago. You know, the question is we may want to follow up with a letter saying basically we feel that it's a medical decision between the parent, okay, and the medical practitioner, okay, to you know, decision, you know, based on whether the parent wants that child to have that vaccine. You know, I don't know how the board feels, but I'm starting to see that same trend, and I think, you know, we should probably, you know, I don't know, follow up with something, you know, so it's newer and fresh in their mind. The impact that it would have on our district would be tremendous, you know, and before they make that decision, they should understand that decision is going to potentially hurt us. Last year, what did we spend, Mr. O'Keefe, on the Rosier Academy?
Several $100,000. I don't know, 550, 600,000.
That's what we spent on all the remote learning last year? I thought it was more than that.
Yeah, I don't think it was much more than that.
So we didn't budget for that this year.
No, but we budget about $1 million a year for home teaching. So the home teaching model from, you know, students with medical needs is now also being morphed to cover quarantine needs. So we're still staying within budget on that, but the majority of those fees this year we're actually diverting to the federal funds and preserving our general fund dollars for potentially other purposes in the spring.
And that's what we're seeing, of course, multiple districts. But I agree with, you know, Sabrina, maybe we, you know, follow-up letter might be necessary.
Laura and then Vinny.
Okay. Sabrina, I agree with you. I went back on our website just to look at our board letters. We've actually sent 3 already. And again, we were ahead of a lot of other districts that didn't even address this. So I'm very proud of the letters we sent. And I think another one, now that the talk is heading towards a mandated vaccine, I would not agree with that for our students. Again, that's personal between a family and their doctor. And that's where I get my medical advice as to whether or not I get a vaccine, whether or not I don't. I don't listen to what's on social media. I discuss it with my doctor, which is what I believe every family should have the choice to do.
Okay.
So are you saying that we should be writing another letter? Because we, like we said, we've been out there in the forefront. We've been there. What does this letter take a different tone, Rob, to your point, which is the economic impact of a mandate on the district, right? Because maybe that gets attention if we're talking the economic impact, because we had that conversation, right?
Right.
If people take the students
That's,
out.
that's the issue that most districts are having. The concern
Right.
is that if this
There's
mandate
another-
comes
yeah.
in a month from now, you're going to have huge percentages, I believe, of your population that is not going to go run to get the vaccine. It was just approved for use in November for 5 to 12 years old. I don't know many families who've had the chance to go sit and talk to their doctor, make their appointment. It's new, and I think a mandate at this point is just it would
So
be astronomical.
We're saying
for most
different things though,
districts.
right? So I get it. We've already been out there saying this board,
It's parental
right?
choice.
Not with the mandate. But if we take a different tone around the economic impact and how that's now going to affect the students, maybe that's the tone we take. But again, up for discussion, because I think we're in the future discussion items. So that's, you know.
I'm just putting it out there, whether we want to charge, to write a letter. I don't want to go against rules, procedures, but I'm seeing many districts posting their letters in that tone of the impact that it will have on districts if a mandate comes out as of right now, and the impact it will have on families, districts, students, etc. So whether we want to, I don't know.
I'm good with writing a letter. I think the letter could say both. I think it says that we stand for parental choice and just know that there is an economic thing too. But I know that there are many people in the community that say, what's the price that you put on their child? Right? So like, they don't care about the money. They just want to make sure that everyone is aware that this is where they stand on it. And I'm fine with that too. Even though we wrote other letters, it was still a little while ago. So just send another letter and say, Sachem is not forgotten about this. And even though you have not responded, we're going to keep sending them and we're going to bug you, even if we have to send one a month or
Right.
one every couple of weeks, just to say, like, we're all over it.
And again, not only the financial aspect, as Stephanie G spoke, when kids are home and trying to learn remotely or whatever would happen, if parents we're here to fight for students, to fight for what's best for our students in Sachem. Mandating a vaccine that is going to force kids to be at home is not what's good for
Yeah.
children. And that's where we have to be on the forefront.
You know what, Laura, you brought up something in my head just now. Can we add in that letter, Mike said about asking our assembly people, but this really never got in front of the assembly. This really kind of went from the governor to the health department to the assembly, and the Senate never really got it. So at the legislative breakfast, unless Governor Hochul's there, it's going to fall on deaf ears at some point. Can we put in our letter that we would like the governor to give us guidance on a test out option for kids, healthy kids that were just considered close contact quarantines, to keep them in school because they are disrupting the educational process by sending these kids home time after time after time. Can we put that in the letter as well?
Right. I think in a lot of the letters I saw, they talked about metrics. What metrics are we going by? And I mean, Chris Clayton, and if you've seen these letters and what districts are asking, I mean, that's pretty much the theme that everybody's saying. We don't have the metrics. We have tons of kids on quarantine. We have no way to get them out prior to the 10 days.
Yep.
You're talking about a mandate that's going to put more kids at home. Those of us who are in the classroom, the kids are behind. You know, you have kids who are surviving, kids who are getting through, kids who are still accelerating. We have a lot of kids still struggling from that learning loss. There's definitely there. I see it firsthand. I don't want to put more kids out and have more learning loss time out of the classroom. We've learned that does not work. We need the kids in the classroom as much as possible. So I know, I'm pretty sure Mr. Clayton has seen these letters and what districts are asking for that to be in them.
You know, I'm going to even, Mr. Venator, how's your letter writing skills? We've asked Mr. Clayton to do a lot. He's working on one already, I think. We've asked him to do a lot of writing for us. It's really an important way we express ourselves in this community.
Better for you.
Outstanding. Thank you so much.
Is this something that we want to charge now? Because we don't meet for another three to 4 weeks. Yeah, I'm good with it too. Jim, please.
Yeah, I'm not for writing a letter, but I could support a letter based on some of the things that were said, based on a vaccine mandate for our kids would really disrupt everything. I am not in favor of that, but I'm definitely not in favor of the board taking a position of parent choice or any of the other political things that are out there. There are enough people out there that feel differently, as I do, as a matter of fact. I can support a letter that any kind of mandate at this time would be detrimental to our students. It would create havoc within the community. I'm all for that. That's good. But any sentence in the letter, you said there was one sentence in there that I would never be able to support, that the school board does not get involved in parent choice, pro or con.
Laura? Yeah. Vinny?
Yeah, I'm okay with the letter, but I also do agree with Jim because we've taken that stance, right, in the past. So I'm okay with the letter, though.
Chris, didn't we have something in our letter last time that was,
Yeah, and what I could do perhaps is, and I know they're probably on the website, I think we posted them, but we could get some prior drafts of various ones that we've done over the years and, sort of highlight those issues that you want to reiterate, and then perhaps some of them that you want to supplement, put it in a draft and have you review it before we send it out.
So what I would suggest is that the new things that we're talking about, that the disruption that this would cause by mandating it, along with what we've previously said in the last letter. We had like a one sentence thing in there about, the decision should be between a doctor and a parent, as to vaccine. I think we had that in our last letter. Okay, and I think the board approved
Yeah,
it.
I think.
Yeah, we did. Something along those, would you be
Referring back to
okay?
the previous letter is fine.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to
So
change any of
language,
that
the language in
content.
that's language that Jim and I, we even spoke about on the phone. Would you be okay with that language? Okay, so I would be okay with the letter as long as, like I said, we use similar language that was in our original letter, but then the new things that we're talking about, that this would be a disruption. It would result in possible massive home teaching. The impact would be great to our district. Please, if you can, not to, don't mandate it.
But I'm going to go with Laura and then Mike,
Yeah.
please.
In our letter, it says, finally, it appears that the issue of mandating the COVID-19 vaccine is being considered by your office and state public health officials. Please be advised that the Sachem Board of Education supports the rights of families to choose whether their or not their child is to receive the COVID-19 vaccine.
That's what was in the last letter. I mean, I would be okay with that same language
Yeah.
if the board's okay.
Good? Everyone, Mike, please.
I don't know if we want to mention in a letter or not, but one of the other things I've been concerned with as thinking about this coming is them wanting to use the schools themselves for the administration of these vaccines, like they're doing in the city, and I'm totally against that and on all grounds.
Yeah.
So,
And that's a stance that we've also taken in the past. And if it's, I mean, I don't know where everybody is, and we can ask now, but that could be part of
I
a
don't
letter.
think we should be in the administration, vaccine administration business. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone have an issue with that?
do we want to include that in a letter?
Chris,
Or
you have the crux of what we want in the letter?
Chris new or Chris old?
Well,
Chris Q.
Unless
Good looking,
somebody's
Chris.
committing a crime, Chris Old is not going to be.
Handsome Chris. I don't know.
Good.
Should I answer to that, Chris, or you, or Chris?
Can't steal my
Venator?
name, Chris.
Any other future discussion items? Well, I know. Well, that's just the way it turned, but that happens. Anyone else? Good. The next meeting of the Sachem Board of Education will be Wednesday, January 5th at 7 p.m. in the Samoset Boardroom right here. Can I take a motion in a second to adjourn into executive session for a hearing, a McKinney-Vento appeal and collective negotiations? Motion by Mr. Isernia, seconded by Mr. Baumann. All in favor? Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everyone. Good night.